So this is something I missed. This came out at the end of last year. This came out on the 7th of 2018. And it's the alt-right is taking over Renaissance fairs. 10 days before the deadly Unite the Right rally in Charlottesville last year, Paul Walsh was telling fellow neo-Nazis how to build and carry shields. Carrying it like that will flop around and be a pain in the ass. The Welsh scolded a member of his chat group who suggested that a hands-free shield modification. How did Walsh know how a shield would work in action? I do a lot of nerdy LARP, live-action roleplay, with shields, he explained. He wasn't kidding. Before Unite the Right, Walsh was an active participant in Dragomir, I think that's how you say it, a medieval fantasy role-playing game in which players dress as knights or orcs, and then bash the hell out of each other with foam swords. Nor was he alone. Since the 19th century, white supremacists have bought into a fictionalized version of medieval Europe, which they interpret incorrectly. According to medieval scholars, as an all-white world, now with white supremacist extremism on the rise, those medieval influences are leaking into the real world, from allegations of neo-nazism in the LARPing community and the professional sword fighting realm to the Renaissance fair loving bombers and the fascist cults who encourage recruits to read Lord of the Rings. Maybe the other LARPers at the Battle for the Rings 8 didn't notice the Nazi symbols in the brawl or colourful shields and tunics, but they were there. At least 2 LARPers carrying shields emblazoned with the black sun, or Shonarad, I think that's how you say it. It's a wheel with jagged spokes that appears frequently in the Nazi and neo-Nazi imagery. The 2 men and their shields appear in online footage in January 2016 in a foam sword fighting event. Or maybe other LARPers had confronted the pair and been informed that actually the symbol was not a Nazi symbol after all, but a variation on a symbol that appeared in an Old Norse and Celtic societies. Even a seasonalist medievalist would have struggled to prove them wrong. A member of the LARPing scene familiar with one of the men carrying the Black Sun Shield told the Daily Beast the man had no known connections to the alt-right, that his costume had a historical German theme, and that in all likelihood the man didn't know the Black Sun's Nazi tie-in. A significant overlap between Nazi fans and European history fans has led to a phenomenon medieval scholar Paul Servert called Schrodinger's medievalism. A piece of medieval culture found in the wild that you know well has been appropriated as the symbol by far-right nationalists or racists. You can't tell which it is until you get more information, and sometimes doing so is impossible, so sometimes you are left in an uncomfortable position of having to treat it both being benign and hostile at the same time. White supremacists have a good reason to turn to medieval culture for validation. Cord Whitaker, an associate professor of English at Wellesley College, told the Daily Beast. Medievalism and a certain idea of the Middle Ages appeals to the white supremacists because of our popular image of the Middle Ages, one which was crafted in the 19th century literature and promoted through fiction, Whitaker said, who studies race in medieval Europe. It's one of a Europe that was quintessentially white, in which people of colour were either not present at all, or such an aberration that they might have well not been even present. The original Nazis were well in on this trend too. The Black Sun was one of a number of ancient European symbols appropriated by the Nazis in their attempt to invent an idealized Aryan Norse heritage, according to the Anti-Defamation League. But that Europe didn't exist outside the novels, medievalist Don Kim told the Daily Beast. This medieval white utopia is entirely false. In fact, the medieval past was multicultural, multi-faith, and multicultural. Kim, an associate professor of English at Brandeis University, said that pointing to an Indian and African immigration pre-1500s to a recent genetic testing that suggested the earliest known British skeleton had dark skin. It's rather difficult to find a pure white utopia any time in the pre-modern, let alone ancient historical records, she said. None of these findings have done much to deter white supremacists, many who still adopt medieval symbols like the black sun, which is just historical enough for neo-Nazis to describe it as a Norse symbol when confronted. But come on, when the singer Shakira released a gold necklace with a black sun pattern overlaid with an ahistorical interpretation, Shakira told fans, and the German news outlets quickly noted the similarity to the Nazi symbol, and Shakira's promotion company pulled the necklace from its store. If Shakira fans are already wise to popular Nazi symbols, what else do amateur European historians have? A long list of these symbols are dog whistles. Ken Moldichin, a history professor and a fencing master, told the Daily Beast. His own area of expertise, historical European medieval martial arts, has its own admirers on the far right. For example, a Thor's hammer. Someone could simply like the medieval character Thor and wear it. They could be a non-racist member of a Rotarian, a non-heathen movement, or they could even be a white supremacist. In Welsh's case, the answer was white supremacy. Walsh, a Michigan man with a fixture of Dagomir tournaments, where he LARPed as an orc called Krogmar Dan Yupa. Since late 2011, the blog Alt-Right Already reported last August, but despite being self-proclaimed love for painting up before battles, orc players often have to paint themselves green. Walsh believes that whites were superior. A member of Walsh's Dogma group told the Alt-Right Already that members quit over Walsh's comments defending slavery and white supremacy. In 2017, Walsh joined a different niche social club, the Traditionalist Worker Party, a neo-Nazi movement that imploded less than a year after its leader was arrested in a trailer brawl over an intra-family love triangle. Going to produce some training videos about basic shield line tactics and organisation, as well as after the TPW event kicks off, Walsh wrote, an alt-right chat group in 2017, according to the chat logs leaked by the media non-profit Unicorn Riot, I know what I'm doing. Elsewhere in the logs, he uses references in his roommate pitching to plan a TPW shield wall that will that person's identity is unclear, although at least one of Walsh Michigan's LARPing friends was at the Unite the Right, according to the alt-right already. That LARPer, Anthony Owen, role-played as a character called Heinz the Barbarian. A person with the username Heinz MI appears in the recently in the chat logs from the group, and the Unite the Right planning group as well, where he gives instructions on building shields and forming a shield wall. The image could almost be funny. Members of the self-proclaimed master race studying shields with a medieval orc LARPer. If not for the TPW actions at the Unite the Right rally, using them as hard plastic shields as battering rams, or a group charging into crowds of unarmed counter-protesters, shoving them onto the pavement and then stabbing them with flagpoles. A lawsuit against the horde of far-right groups, including the TPW, accuses them of using their shields like weapons in order to escape litigation. A number of the group in the lawsuit have agreed not to return to Charlottesville with weapons, including shields. Meanwhile, other medievalist communities have also struggled with alt-right incursions, and the increase of the historical European medieval arts, or HEMA community, whose unwelcome factions have more deadly weapons. Mulchison, the history professor and HEMA instructor, also said that the community is overwhelmingly a tolerant one, but over the past several years he's catalogued a far-right fascination with the field, which includes fencing and dueling with very real, very sharp swords. It annoys else besides me to into a person with a swastika avatar asked in Iron March, a now defunct Nazi forum. Modston included in the post in a presentation in last year's International Congress on Medieval Studies, where he gave a talk on white supremacist trends in his sport. He also conducted a survey, which he stresses is not peer-reviewed, of more than 300 HEMA participants, in which 10 to the 15% respondents included that they have or have held far-right views. Rack's Journal, a white supremacist site published by Richard Spencer, has run multiple pieces promoting HEMA, selling it as a more authentic medieval experience than the games like Dogger and This Ain't LARPing. One article reads, Larry McWilliams, a Texas man who attempted to destroy Austin's Mexican consulate with bullets and bottles of propane in 2014, was described by neighbours as being into martial arts, swords, and Renaissance fairs. McWilliams, who was killed in a firefight with police after firing more than 100 shots in a downtown Austin, was reportedly affiliated with the Pinus Priesthood, a Christian identity group that advocates for violence against people of colour. And just months ago, the HEMA community erupted into controversy after some of its best-known Swedish fighters had revealed that they had liked or shared historical Nazi propaganda or other racist imagery. In a long statement, and the most prominent of the fencers, Alex Peterson, denounced his old Nazi jokes as the product of a dark period in his life, which he apologised. Peterson was not a white supremacist. Peter said he was not a white supremacist and had friends of many races, but went on to describe views similar to that of the identitarian movement, warning that immigrants are replacing white Swedes who quote, have the right to our own country. A lot of people are drawn to the HEMA and other medievalist subcultures, like the Society for Creative Anachronism, because it fits into their overall identitarian worldview. Their ideas of the European culture, Modician said, is indicative particularly of those people in Sweden who attempt to hide their participation in some white supremacist websites. But if you read their vicarious blogs and writings, you see that it all fits into an overlord worldview that romanticizes an imagined homogeneous past. This is an imagined past, as medievalist describes it, historically accurate, often takes a backseat to fantasy. Neo-Nazis and European nationalists have laid claim to Beowulf, an old English epic poem about a Norse warrior they interpret as a vision of an all-white warrior society, where a charity group produced a low-budget Beowulf adaptation starring a black actor in 2017. They received death threats from self-proclaimed Aryans. On the recommendation reading page of one of its websites, the murderous neo-Nazi group Atomwolfen, I think that's how you say it, lists the medievalist fantasy series Lord of the Rings alongside Hitler's writing and texts that advocate terrorism. Also on the approved reading list, there are 3 books by Varg Vikersen, a Norwegian musician who has been in prison and prohibition stints for murder, church burnings, and inciting racial hatred, has promoted his own brand of pagan white supremacy. Vikersen's profile picture on his Amazon page shows him wearing a chainmail shirt. He described himself as being interested in tabletop role-playing games, HEMA, archaeology, prehistory, and pre-European religion and survivalism. Historically questionable fiction about medieval Europe has been fueling white supremacist fantasies for the past 150 years, Whitaker and the Wellesley College professor said. In the 19th century, it was largely through medievalizing novels like Sir Walter Scott's Ivanhoe, which was probably the biggest and most well-known example, he said. That novel played a big role in racial politics in the mid-19th century during and after the Civil War. The result, particularly after the Civil War, was it had its own brand of LARPing. You often had white Southerners after the Civil War imagining themselves as characters in Ivanhoe and holding medieval-style tournaments as public recreation, he said. This was a way of recouping their experience in the American Civil War as the medieval experience of Norman versus the Frank. This is one instance of one way in which the narrative of an all-white medieval ages has been important to white supremacy for so long. Much in the way of what could be Confederates learned on the imagination of the past of the medieval England, modern racists have poured millions into an imagined Confederacy. Most of the Confederate flags and statues that dot the US southern states did not appear during or immediately after the Civil War, but a century later, particularly during the Civil Rights movements. Though the statues advocates defend themselves as symbols of pride and heritage, the construction of a new Confederate site has spiked during radicalizing conflicts, the Atlantic has previously reported. That LARPing lineage came full circle at the Unite the Right, which was initially described as a rally in the defence of a Confederate statue in Charlottesville, now with members of their communities marching among the fascists at Charlottesville or sharing Nazi pictures, or some anti-racialist medievalists are fighting back. It is safe to say that there are white supremacists and Nazis who are actively using DAG as a personal and organisational training ground to give them an edge in the premeditated race riots. One participant wrote on the Facebook page after Walsh was revealed that he had marched at the Unite the Right rally. The Doghouse Battle Games, which supports the organising body, soon banned Walsh from future competitions. But in Hem, weeding out white supremacy can be more complicated. The difficulty is that the idea of the Aboriginal European martial arts works very well as a dog whistle, he said. It is very hard to detoxify that, and we have people who are interested in this, and we have people who make overt political statements. Debates over the sport's next steps have led to a real split. I got challenged to a duel with the sharp weapons over this stance, Moshikin said. Even medievalist academics are torn on how to address their field's unwanted fan base on the far right. The rift turned bitter ahead of this year's International Conference on Medieval Studies. Kim and the Balinese professor had previously called on her colleagues to condemn white supremacy. Some, including a University of Chicago medievalist who contributed to Breitbart, refused, resulting in a flame war against Kim and her colleagues. And this is one of the things that we've got to really look out for. Because obviously what's going to happen is that these people are flocking to this and then using not what's actually really historically accurate, but are more flocking to an idealized European world that really never existed. And just like in politics and, that's going on at the moment, you have a lot of people like, quote-unquote, Sargon of Akkad and Dankula, who have never, ever once in their entire careers actually commented on actual policy, which is how you should really talk about politics, how that policy affects people's day-to-day lives and how that would affect you as a person. Then you've got to come to the conclusion that this is going to be used as a potential recruiting ground, and as we saw there from the article, these actual lessons that these guys learned was used at the Unite the Right rally in Charlottesville to basically use a shield wall as an actual weapon against counter-protesters. So this is something else now that we've got to take on board, because we've got to be careful of these far-right lunatics infiltrating the historical martial arts community and, promoting, bizarre historical retcons, which, again, never really existed. So I would definitely encourage, professors out there, history professors, to be on the lookout for this, or if you are on a website and you see someone spreading this nonsense, then you need to challenge them on this, because this will come... they will use this as a recruitment ground, the alt-right especially, and then when they recruit them, they will send them to these places to get trained. It's all, unfortunately, it's a big, massive, vicious circle and a cycle, as that showed. They all came back to start defending, these conservative monuments that were put up during the civil rights era because they wanted to idolise this, bygone historical Confederate past that, never really existed. But there you go.